in your businesses, wherever you are at.
This is the generation of them that seek his face. This is the generation of them that seek his face.
Shalom, shalom. Welcome to Olive Tree Congregation. And we are Olive Tree Congregation in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And of course, those of you that in our audience know that you're in Albuquerque, right? We all know we're in Albuquerque. But for those of you that are joining us through YouTube or Facebook or any other media, we are Olive Tree Fellowship here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And the reason we say that is because, of course, there's other Olive Tree congregations. Some of them are some of the congregations are Christian, some of them are Messianic, but there's other Messianic congregations with the name of Olive Tree in different cities in the United States. We are Olive Tree Fellowship in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we are a Mosaic congregation, we are a Messianic congregation, and we are an apostolic congregation. And what that means is that we are Mosaic because we believe in the Torah. We believe to the best of our ability in exile and in the countries that we live in, that we are to live the Torah lifestyle and guard the Torah and keep the Torah. Again, to the best of the abilities that we have now. We don't have a temple. We don't have a high priest. And we are really not in the land, and so there are situations that make it sometimes next to impossible to observe the whole Torah lifestyle. But to the best of our ability, we want to be Mosaic. We follow the Tanakh, what the King James calls the Old Testament. And so we follow from Genesis to Malachi, or Genesis to 2nd Chronicles in the Hebrew outline. We want to follow what Adonai said, what Yeshua said, what Paul said. We're also Messianic. And of course, all Jewish people are Messianic. Every Jew, Orthodox, Reform, they're all Messianic. Why? Because every Jew believes that the Messiah is coming. Well, we're Messianic. We're what I call Yeshuic Messianic, in that we believe that Yeshua was the Messiah, and he came one time, and we're waiting for Messiah Yeshua to come again. So that makes us Messianic. But we're also apostolic, because we believe in Paul, Peter, and what they wrote. So from Genesis to Revelation is a that is the full good news that Adonai has for mankind. And it's all about Adonai loving the world, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him will not perish, but they will have everlasting life. And so we want to welcome you. Today we are studying the 46th Parsha of the year. Now look at that, 46, and there's 54. That means we're going down fast. And the Parsha today is Ekev. Say with me, Ekev. And some people pronounce it Ekev, but it is Ekev. And the word Ekev means as a result. As a result. And again, our Parsha today is found in Deuteronomy 7:12 to Deuteronomy 11:25. Now, notice that they are in the middle of paragraphs, or some of them in the middle of verses. Again, we don't know why anybody translated it that way, but or cut the parshot in the middle sometimes of a verse, but we are in that aspect today, Ekev. Now, here in Deuteronomy 7:12, it says, Vechaya Ekev. And it was because, or it was as a result of. It was as a consequence of. Ekev, as a consequence. Tishme'un. Tishme'un. Notice that those of you that know Hebrew, in Tishme'un is the word Shema. The word Shema is there. You see the Shin, the Mem, and the Ayin, Shema. And it says, and it shall be because, or when, because, as a consequence, as a result of you, Shema, of you all listening, of you paying attention to the Mishpatim. To the Mishpatim. It shall be when you listen, and because you listen. Now remember, Shema, listen up, not only means to listen and hear, it means to listen and obey. Shema, listen up. Those of you in the military, when your DI said, listen up, it just didn't mean hear what he's saying and you doing whatever you want. You came to attention and you did what they told you. Now the word Ekev means several things. Again, it means as a result of, because, for a consequence, as a consequence. Ekev is also a word that means a heel. A heel of your foot, your heel. In fact, Yaakov, Jacob, means the heel. Can you imagine being called the heel? Because of an attitude that Adonai saw in him, and that was transferred to his name. Of course, later on, Adonai changed his name from, hey, you heel, to Prince of Elohim, to this exalted prince called Israel. So Yaakov had his name changed to Israel. So when you hear the name Israel, you not only think of the land, you don't only think of this nation today, but you think of Yaakov. Israel is Yaakov's land. The land promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov, and to the 12 descendants of Yaakov. Now, when you see the same word in Scripture, sometimes people that are mystics tend to say, ooh, look at this. Heel is over here, Ekev is here, and Ekev is here, so therefore both are connected. Many times they're not connected. In this case, the word Ekev does not mean heel. In this case, it means because. Now, in some forms of, again, mysticism, in some forms of rabbinic commentary, the word Ekev is talked about in conjunction with commandments. And many rabbis, many teachers have looked upon what they call head commandments and heel commandments. A head commandment is, thou shalt not murder. That's heavy. That's a heavy one. No adultery. Those are heavy ones. But then there's some commandments that have been looked upon as trifle commandments. Oh, those are, and they're the commandments that many times people stomp on. Heel commandments. And they've looked upon that. Now, way before the sages, way before the rabbis, way before all these commentaries, we have a very important verse. Turn with me to Matthew 5:17 to 19. And this is Yeshua speaking. And Yeshua said, do not imagine. Do not think. Don't put it in your mind. Do not imagine Don't even think about this. That I have come to abolish, make null and void the Torah or the prophets. In other words, the Tanakh. The Tanakh is the Torah and the prophets. Do not think I've come to obliterate them, to abolish them, to make them null and void. No, I have not come to abolish, but to complete them, to fulfill them, to bring them up to their true meaning. And then he gives us several examples of the true meaning. What does it mean to complete? What does it mean to fulfill the Torah? In truth, I tell you, till heaven and earth disappear, not one yod, the smallest letter in the Aleph Bet at the time of Yeshua, nor one tittle, the way it was written, is to disappear from Torah till its purpose is achieved. Now, because when you came in, you saw the sun, you saw the earth, you saw the heavens, the blue skies. It's not over yet, and it won't be over. Regardless of what people say, the end is still not yet. Yeah, there's going to be famines. There's going to be all kinds of tribulation. Don't worry. COVID-19 is just about, in fact, COVID-19 is going to, in history, rank very small compared to what the world has ever known. Can you imagine the flood? Can you imagine being under restriction for 400 years in Egypt? Can you imagine being in Babylon? We can't even imagine the Holocaust, the Inquisitions, these things. Torah's still here. It hasn't disappeared yet. Therefore, anyone who infringes even one of the least of these commandments, one of the least, that's what we would call a heel commandment. One of the bottom ones that, sometimes we step on. How many ants have you stepped on in the last week that you didn't even know of? I'm sure none of you have stepped on an elephant or even on a little dog. You see a dog, a cat, we will go around. We won't step on them. But how many ants, how many bugs have you stepped on that you didn't even know were there? They're, everywhere. And we don't, I killed an ant. I killed it. Now, there might be some people like that, but I just killed an ant. But none of us are going to go stomping on little cats or stomping on, definitely not on an elephant or a tiger. Now, the big animals, we're not going to do that. But when it comes to insignificant, what people call insignificant little critters, we don't spend too much time worrying about that. But we need to understand that every living animal has its purpose. There's purposes for the ants. There's purposes even for those dreaded cucarachas. There's purpose for them. There's a purpose for every commandment. There's a purpose for every commandment that Adonai has given us. Now, one of the things that we all need to understand is that while there are, according to Maimonides, 613 commandments. Now, that is just his counting. Some people have counted more, some people have counted less. But remember, he calls them commandments. Of course, some of them are commandments, mitzvot. Some of them are mishpatim. Some of them are chukim. Some of them are yidot. The different classifications of commandments. But one of the things that we know is that if we take that as a average or as a number of commandments in Torah, And this is just the Torah. That's just the Torah. And in legalism, they're supposed to keep all of them. Let me tell you, you can't keep all of them. And you're not even supposed to keep all of them. Why? Because some commandments have to do with just men alone. Some commandments have to do with women alone. Some commandments have to do with the temple structure. We don't have a temple. We don't have a high priest. Some have to do with a king. Some have to do when you're in the land. Others are wherever you live, it says. So of all the, quote, 613 commandments, the commandments that have to be kept by any one individual right away whittles down to a smaller amount. An amount that even in the New Covenant Scriptures, we as believers in Yeshua are ordained to also keep. Just in the Torah alone, or if you look at the Tanakh, or if you look at the apostolic writings, the Gospels, the epistles, the book of Revelation, which are the head commandments, which are the big ones, and which are the heel commandments, which are the insignificant ones? Well, I would venture to say that there are no insignificant commandments. In fact, Yeshua said, we are told that if you break one part of Torah, you've broken the whole Torah. People are guilty not of breaking commandments 5, 10, 15, but of breaking Torah. In fact, I'm a Torah breaker. How many of you are Torah breakers? We've broken Torah. That's why we need Yeshua. That's why we need Yeshua, because we have not kept the Torah and we're liable. The soul that sins, it shall die. But that's why Adonai gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life. Yeshua said, therefore, anyone who infringes even one of the least of these commandments. Now remember, he's talking here Torah. He's not even talking here what's ahead. He's looking at Torah. He's looking at Tanakh. Whoever infringes even the least, that means that Yeshua never intended the Torah and the prophets to become null and void. No one commandment in Torah is null and void. None. Everyone must be kept. And they will be kept according to the position, the person, the place. We must keep them all. But it goes on to say, anyone, and anyone could be everyone or someone, whosoever infringes even one of the least and teaches others to do the same will be considered least in the kingdom of heaven. Now look at this. Let's look at this with what we were seeing. Whoever infringes even the least commandment, you broke a small little commandment. Now think of all the commandments in Torah. And you're breaking one of these insignificant ones. These little ones, whatever you would consider insignificant. Because people have a different bar for what is significant and what is insignificant. In fact, even among Judaism and even among Messianics, there's some people that consider, for example, Well, eating a ham sandwich would be a commandment that every one of us must adhere to, and not eat no pork, not eat no ham, no bacon, nothing like that. But this is a real story. I was teaching a seminar in San Antonio. In fact, some of you were with me. Mr. T was with me, and I was teaching a conference over there, and we were eating breakfast. And a couple of the people that were speakers at this Messianic convention were eating breakfast with bacon and eggs. And the thing is, I looked at that and I said, well, we're talking about someone who's a major teacher. And they said, oh, it's just one or two things. It's not that bad. That's a least commandment to them. To Adonai, that would be a head commandment to us. To them, it was a heel commandment. Now again, you have your own bar. There's some things that you do on Shabbat that Adonai might not say no, and you say, well, it's not that, it's just one load of laundry. Or it's just it's not that bad. And we reduce major ones to heel commandments, and sometimes we make a heel commandment a major commandment, or what someone would consider a heel commandment. Many times you've heard that saying, they major on the minors and minor on the majors. But you teach others to do the same. Either by your example or say, oh, you know what? It's okay to do that. Don't worry. It's all right. And you teach others, you will be considered least in the kingdom of heaven. In other words, in the kingdom of heaven, you're not going to be head, you're going to be a heel in the kingdom of heaven. Now, let me ask you a question. How many of you want to be a heel in the kingdom of heaven? Not me. Now, remember, we're talking about in the kingdom of heaven. Now, in the kingdom of heaven, that means the millennial kingdom. When the resurrection takes place, we go up before the Bema seat. In fact, from here we could spend another hour on 1 Corinthians 3:10 and following. We go up to the Bema seat where believers, the Bema seat is a judgment for believers only. And there believers are going to be judged on this. We're not going to be judged as far as the sin we've committed that Adonai Yeshua took from us, paid on the cross. We're going to be judged according to our works. Every one of our works is going to be judged at the resurrection. His appointment for man once to die, then the judgment. And that judgment for the believer is the Bema seat. The judgment for the unbeliever is the great white throne, which is what we call sentencing. And in the kingdom of heaven, there's going to be believers with many crowns. There's going to be believers with no crowns. There's going to be believers that will be ruling 5-10 cities in the millennial kingdom. And there'll be believers that will be ruling one city. In fact, there'll be believers that will not be ruling any cities. In fact, there'll be believers that will be outside the gates of the kingdom, a special place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. In other words, these believers will be full of regret. that their life after salvation, their sanctified life wasn't sanctified, it was worldly, and the worldly life of a believer is going to be judged at the resurrection. There will be people that will be great in the kingdom of heaven, and there will be people that will be least in the kingdom of heaven. And again, we're talking about believers. There in 1 Corinthians 3:10 and following, talk about the man who builds his house with hay, wood, and stubble. In other words, the foundation that he got was Yeshua, his salvation. But after you're saved, after you're inside, then that's what Torah is for, so that we could become the men and women where we will inherit the land. Obeying the commandments is about inheriting the land. Following the commandments is about inheriting the land. And we're not just talking about the land right now, today. We're talking about the millennial kingdom land. Because remember, everything that Adonai says, it's about the kingdom. It's about the kingdom. How many of you pray, thy kingdom come, thy will be done? That's Yeshua taught us to pray for the kingdom. Everything is about the kingdom, where Yeshua will be the Messiah, where he will be the prophet, where he will be the king, the high priest. And we will be resurrected. And we will inherit the land. We will inherit the true land. And teaches others will be considered least in the kingdom of heaven, will be considered a heel. But the person who keeps them, the person who what? Keeps them and teaches them, will be considered gadol, great in the kingdom of heaven. Now, yes, because we are called to be humble, we're not there, well, I'm going to be great and I'm going to be greater than you. And oh, no, it's none of that stuff. But Adonai would want us to be great in his kingdom. He'd want us to, in fact, we are told, even in Paul, talking about the crowns that we're going to win. There are crowns of life. There's crowns for different services to be done. But there's some that are not going to receive crowns. In fact, there in 1 Corinthians 3:10 and following, it talks about those that build their house in gold, silver, and precious stones. That a purging fire is going to come, and it's going to sweep down and burn your house down. And those that built with hay, wood, and stubble, their house is going to be burned. And yes, the salvation's there because the foundation, and it says, and they will be saved, but as one who has gone through the fire, through purging, through judgment. That's the Bema seat. And the place in the kingdom, you're going to live in a foundation. Yes, Yeshua, but not a house. And there's those that the fire is going to come. The gold, silver, and precious stones are going to withstand it and be even purified more by it. And they're going to enter in to the joys of the Father. A question is, do we want to be great or we want to be least? Now, in today's Parsha, actually before we even get to today's Parsha, let's go back to Deuteronomy. And Deuteronomy 7 12 there. And it says, because you have listened to this mishpatim. In the Jerusalem Bible translation, it says, listen to these ordinances, be true to them and observe them, and in return, as a result, in consequence, because you have listened, and by listening means obedience, because you have obeyed these mishpatim, because of that, Yahweh your Elohim will be true to his covenant. Now remember the covenant that he made with our father Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov? He made the same covenant with them. And it was a covenant for a land, a seed, and a blessing. A land, a seed, and a blessing. And Adonai wants us to be true to the covenant. Because we are true, Ekev, because you are true, because you're following what he said, then he's going to be true to his covenant. As a consequence. Now, Abraham received it not because he deserved it. Isaac received it not because he deserved it. Yaakov received it not because he deserved it. The 12 received it not because they deserved it. In fact, they received it. You know, this is one of the reasons why I believe a lot of times people say, why is it that when you read, especially Genesis and Exodus and throughout the scriptures, David, and why is it that you have all these sinners? These great men and women, they're all sinners. Have you guys noticed that? They're bad people. They're connivers. They're murderers. They're bad people. Anything new under the sun? Nothing new. La misma cosa. Same thing. That's some of us. In fact, some of the stories in the Bible could be us. Could be the most holiest people that we know. Some of the stories in the Bible are us, are them. That's why we need a Savior. But because you follow this, Adonai is going to do this. None of our ancestors deserved it, but they received it. But after you receive it without merit, after you receive it by grace, unmerited favor, after you receive it that way, then Adonai wants you to know that because you've been acting the right way, he is going to be true to his covenant. And by the way, we're going to see if you act the wrong way, you will lose it. That seems like a paradox. That seems like, well, wait a second. Adonai, you're saying this over here is by grace and we don't, but over here you're saying that it's because we are following, because we're listening and obeying, that you're going to be true also. Let's go on. In return, Yahweh your Elohim will be true to the covenant, the kindness he promised your fathers. He will love you and bless you and increase your numbers. He will bless the fruit of your body, the produce of your soil, your corn, your wine, your oil, the issue of your cattle, the young of your flock, in the land he swore your fathers that he would give you. you will be more blessed than all the people. No one, no man or woman, you shall, or woman among you shall be barren, no male or female of your beast infertile. Because, remember, it's Ekev. Ekev, because you have listened to his voice. It's already happening. It's already starting to pan out. They've been true, and Adonai is blessing them. All these blessings, look at that. Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, the way it was supposed to be, the way it will be in the millennium, as we've said, is another what people would call a true Shangri-La. In fact, what people consider a Shangri-La is a poor imitation, a poor copy, a counterfeit of what the millennial kingdom is going to be. Thy kingdom come. Now remember, it is believers in Yeshua that will inherit the kingdom. You must believe in Yeshua to inherit the kingdom of Israel. Has nothing to do with race, has nothing to do with color, has nothing to do with creed. It has to do with believing in Yeshua and having him deal with the sin in us at the cross. It goes on to say, now verse 15, look at this. Now here's where, in my mind, in my life, I say, where should the bar be? We put the bar here, we put the bar low, but Adonai has the place of the bar at any one point in time. At any one point in time. And I ask Adonai, show us the bar, because, again, this group says this, that group says this, you read this, you read that, you study, and I want to have the bar where it should be in my life, and I could teach it to you, because if I teach you the commandments, then I and you will be part of that great in the kingdom of Adonai. But watch what it says. Yahweh will keep all sickness far from you. He will not afflict you. You will not be afflicted with those diseases of Egypt, for which you have known. But he will save them for those who hate you. Let's take that simple verse right there, and let's put it in context of Israel in the land. If Israel followed the mishpatim, the hukim, the way Adonai wanted them followed, with a pure heart, with a clean mind, with the way they were meant to be, the land of Israel would be a healed community. Outside of the borders of Israel, people would be sick and dying of sicknesses. Now, we're all going to die, but Adonai's way of dying would be that you would die in your sleep, that you would just go home. Not ravaged by this cancer, by that heart attack, by COVID-19. But that when it's time for us to go home, we would go home. There's a promise here. Now, this is not one of those promises that you could take and name it and claim it. I claim no disease shall afflict me. In fact, it's interesting that now that this COVID situation came up, a lot of preachers started rebuking it and, I will not, no plague shall come near my dwelling. And many of those have died. Many of those guys have died. Congregations have been shut because, and we're talking about some of those congregations who at the beginning were name it and claim it type Pentecostal that really they hit a brick wall. Scripture is not a name it and claim it. No plague shall come nigh my dwelling. You can't just claim that and think that that's going to save you. No. It's much deeper than that. And this is what our Parsha is about. Ekev. 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 Because you are listening to my mishpatim, you're listening to my commandments, my chukim, my mitzvot. Yahweh will bless you. Yahweh will take sickness from you. The diseases that you knew in Egypt, the cancers and all these other tumors and all that. You won't get Israel, but he will save them for your enemies, for those that hate you. A Torah observant, and I don't believe we are there right now. I believe every one of us has so much soul searching. Father, show me. In fact, here's where Psalms 119, go home and read Psalms 119. Here's where Psalms 119 really needs to take. Show me your Torah that I may do your will. Show me, open my eyes that I may follow you, that I may, and because, Ekev, because you do that, because you not only know his Torah but follow Torah, then I will bless you. Because of that, I will bless. But we've already seen blessings and cursing, blessings and cursing, blessings. And we're going to see that if we could get through the next section. Verse 17, the power of Yahweh. Moses continues his second sermon here. And again, you may say in your heart, in other words, Israel might have fear. Then there's some people saying in their heart, this COVID, I can't do this, I can't do that, a lot of fear, doubt, unbelief. If you say in your heart, these nations outnumber me, how shall I be able to dispose them? Do not be afraid of them. Remember how Yahweh, your Elohim, dealt with Pharaoh and all Egypt. The great ordeals your own eyes have seen. Can you imagine the great history? And throughout this Parsha, it's history, remembering history. Deuteronomy is Moses historically going through the last 40 years showing, look what Adonai has done. He's going to do again. The mighty hand and outstretched arm with which Yahweh brought you out. That's why the Exodus story that we remember at Pesach has to be passed on to the next generation, because that is the story of stories. That is the story of the deliverance of our people from Egypt. And that's why at Pesach, the story of the mightier deliverance of Yeshua on the cross needs to be retold over and over and over again to the next generation. Do not be afraid of him, he says in verse 21. Do not be afraid of him. Little by little, Yahweh your Elohim will destroy these nations. By the way, look, it says little by little. Sometimes we always think that looking back, when he destroyed the nations, he destroyed them, boom, boom, boom. It's se acabó. No. It was a little by little by little by little process. And that's how we grow. That's how we grow, little by little. And then he talks about what they had to do with the idols. Adonai promises them blessings. But what happens if they get involved in idolatry? And he warns them against idolatry. Now, he begins to, again, looking at the land. And remember, the land that Adonai gave to Joshua to conquer, that David lived in, that Yeshua lived in, that was taken away by captivity several times, and the modern state of Israel is there. We're talking about that land, but we're not talking about it in our time, but we're talking about it in messianic times, which we will inherit, which we, believers in Yeshua, will inherit. All the commandments I enjoin on you today, you must keep and observe, so that you may live long and increase in number, and enter into the land that Yahweh promised on oath to your fathers, and make it your own. Now we start seeing that other side of the coin. Ekev, because you follow, Adonai will be true. But now we see the other side of the coin that says, you must keep him or observe them, and then you will, because you do that, increase. But what happens if we don't? What happens if we are, like in the last 40 years, have been disobedient? Adonai will show us. Now, here in verse 3 is a very important, actually starting in verse 2. Remember how Yahweh your Elohim led you for 40 years in the wilderness. Watch this. To humble you, to test you, and to know your innermost heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. Again, I don't know, and I really don't know. I hear what the fake news or the no news or the this news or the other news says. We've heard the controversies that started in China. Was it China? Was it a bioweapon? I don't know none of that stuff. Some people think it's a hoax. Some people think it's nothing. I don't know. I really cannot tell you what it is. But watch this. I know Adonai wants to humble me. I know Adonai wants to test me. I know Adonai wants to know what's in my heart. And is Adonai allowing? Because remember, nothing happens without his allowance. Nothing happens without his allowance. He is sovereign. This did not catch Adonai by surprise. Adonai is sovereign. And watch this. Is Adonai using this to humble you? To test you? Is this fire that's going on around the world testing the world? before that great day comes? Is he getting the world ready? Now he goes on to say, he humbled you and made you feel hunger. That word made you feel hunger is he starved you. Did you know when Israel was going through the wilderness there, they didn't have enough food to eat. And remember, it says they grumbled, and they grumbled against Moses, they grumbled against Adonai. Adonai is sovereign. He knew there wasn't going to be that much food, but he starved them. Can you imagine Adonai starving his people? Look what it says. He says, he humbled you. He made you feel hunger. He fed you with manna, which neither you nor your fathers had known, to make you understand that man does not live by bread alone, but lives on everything that comes from the mouth of Yahweh. In other words, Adonai allowed them to feel hungry so that they could know what hunger is, so that they could look to Adonai. And part of their grumbling was okay. It's when they said, we want to go back to Egypt. No. If they would have said, Father, we and just stopped there, Adonai would have fed them right away. But he made them feel hungry to test them, to humble them. So much things in our lives Adonai has. We might not even know what Adonai has done in our lives, so that we could become the men and women that he wants us to be. And then he goes on to say, the clothes on your back did not wear out, and your feet were not swollen all those 40 years. Look at that. Can you imagine wearing the same jacket for 40 years, same pants for 40 years, same shoes for 40 years? And every morning they were clean. Every morning they were pressed. You know, your shoes didn't wear out for 40 years. Adonai, that's the blessings of Adonai. And then learn from this. Learn. Lamad, where we get the word talmid. Be discipled, be taught. Learn. Learn from this, that Yahweh your Elohim was training you. In other words, you were in boot camp. Can you imagine? Adonai had Israel in a 40-year boot camp. Can you imagine being in boot camp for 40 years? Being in boot camp for 40 years. Adonai was training you. Learn from this. He was training you as a man trains his child. And keep the commandments of Yahweh and follow his ways, reverence him. These three things. Keep his commandments, follow his way, reverence him. He was training us as a father trains his child. Adonai is our coach. He was coaching them. Just like a coach. One more. One more lap. I can't. One more lap. Do it. One more. One more bench press. One more. Just one more. I can't. One more. Adonai, as a father trains his son, is teaching us. Even right now, through all this, he's teaching us. Can we learn his lessons? Can we use this to become more mature men and women? Can we use this to become men and women that will not cry and will not give up and say, oh, the world is going through thing, I can't take it anymore. A lot of people are giving up. We have a history of our people not giving up. That's part of our history. By the way, there was something there too that I didn't mention. Here in verse 3, it says, he fed you with manna which neither you nor your fathers knew, to make you understand that. The word to make you understand is this idea of in your brain, for there to be something in your brain, a change. So it's almost like Adonai was, through all this, rewiring the brain of the Hebrew so that their brain could understand certain things. And you know what? I'm always asking Adonai, give me a Hebrew mind. Because we've grown up in an American mind. We've grown up in Western thought and culture. But I want Adonai to give me a Hebrew mind. You know what? We've just run out of time. We only got 2 out of the 11 teachings there. Hey, there's so much. Look at it. There's so much. I want to thank you for joining us today. I want to remind you that we are open on Tuesdays for the Ezra Institute for our men's Bible school program. Wednesday night for Bible study for the family. And next Shabbat at 11 o'clock. And again, for those that are listening over our media, we are at 2621 Cagua, C-A-G-U-A Drive Northeast, Albuquerque, New Mexico, 87110. And if you are in the Albuquerque area, please feel free to drop by on Sabbath or Wednesday night. Sabbath at 11 o'clock a.m. and Wednesday night at 7 o'clock p.m., 11 o'clock a.m. and 7 p.m. In the evening. And, of course, our telephone number is 505-352-1003. And please go to our websites. Those of you that I thank some of you that are giving your tithings through PayPal. And we've even had someone give us a gift through PayPal from, I believe it was Tennessee or something like that. I want to thank you for that. Because as a small congregation and a lot of our people aren't back, we have plenty of room, by the way. We have plenty of room. So if you are listening to us, even one of our members, and you're listening to us, please, there's plenty of room. You are welcome to join us. And, of course, in our websites, which will be at the end of the program, PayPal is available. Let's go ahead and stand and close in prayer. Father, I thank you for the opportunity that we have to come here. And, Father, I could just go on, but, Father, I know that each one of us needs to go home and eat and be part of our family Shabbat. And so, Father, that right now, after tonight, we could start studying the Parsha at home for next week and then come and be able to look at some of these areas that we need to learn. Yevarechecha Yahweh va'ish merecha. A'ir Yahweh panav elecha vichunecha. Asa Yahweh panav elecha vayasem lecha shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May Yahweh lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Shalom, shalom. You may take your seats. Shalom, shalom. Welcome to Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries. Thank you for joining us on our channel. If you have enjoyed this teaching and would like to see more, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to click the notification bell so that you can be notified when we have new videos. If you would like to support Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries, please visit us at olivetreefellowship.com or TorahUnleashed.org. We thank you for your past support and hope to continue with you. Shalom, shalom. Have a good day. Shalom, shalom y bienvenidos a Olive Tree y a la Torah desatada. Les doy gracias a ustedes y a Adonai por su apoyo que nos han dado aquí. Y si quieren continuar a hacer una donación, pueden ir aquí en TorahUnleashed.org o en olivetreefellowship.com y ahí pueden dar una donación. Su apoyo, su ayuda es importante en estos días. Shalom, shalom.